In this video, we're going to take conditional statements and turn them into symbolic format. Now, that sounds pretty much exactly like what we're going to do. See, with conditional statements, we can actually express every conditional statement in some form of letters or symbols. Here are some of the key symbols that we need to know that are going to show up a lot. So your hypothesis is always represented by P, your conclusion is represented by Q, and then implies. So you might say, well, I don't see implies in conditional statements. Well, implies, the arrow actually is the if-then itself. So the hypothesis is what comes after the if, the conclusion is what comes after the then. The arrow is the if-then piece. To negate something, we put a little not sign, and then therefore is 3 dots. And if you rearrange the there, you can actually turn it into 3, so maybe that's a way to remember therefore. Or you might ask, what is it there for? I don't know. Find a way to remember these symbols. We're going to talk about a few more in a minute, but we're going to start with these as our key symbols. So let me show you how this works. Let's say we're taking our statements. The P represents I go shopping, and the Q says I will buy a hat. So how would we express P implies Q? And notice how we read that. P implies, that's our arrow, Q. Well, we'd say it's something like this. If I go shopping, then I will buy a hat. Okay? Just like that. Now let's try the opposite direction. If I buy a hat, then I went shopping. And if you need to change the verbs a little bit, notice how I changed will buy to buy and go to went. That's fine, as long as you're keeping the hat and the shopping in the correct places. So our original statement would be our conditional statement. This would be our converse, right? We've taken the statements and we've switched them. All right, up next, let's do our inverse. Notice we have some negate signs. So if I don't go shopping, then I won't buy a hat. So notice how we've negated both of these. We've kept it the correct way, but we see the not signs, the negation signs on each of these. All right, last one, contrapositive, and this is just a good review of converse, inverse, contrapositive. If I don't buy a hat, then I didn't go shopping. All right, and let's bring that up so you can see it. So you can see how we can express each of these statements in terms of symbolic format. It's much easier to work with these symbols than it is to work kind of with our words. It's much faster and simpler. So let's go the other direction now. Let's say I have the statements. How do I express it as symbols? So here we've got P is equal to 2 planes intersect, and Q is the intersection is a line. So let's look at this first one. If 2 planes don't intersect, so intersection is a P statement, and notice it's don't. So this would be not P. Then, so we're going to put a implies, the intersection is a line, and that's going to be our Q statement. So you will notice that this is not a converse, inverse, or contrapositive. I've negated one side but not the other side. That is okay. It's not, there's no name for this, or if there is, we're not going to learn it, okay? Not P implies Q. However, we can set up different things with these symbols than we might normally have names for. Let's try the next one. If the intersection is not a line, so that's going to be our Q statement negated. So not Q implies, then the 2 planes do not intersect. That would be not P. All right, so hopefully this gives you a basic idea of how we transfer things into symbolic format. Now, there's another list of symbols that we need to know, and this one's maybe a little bit more complicated. We've actually already seen the therefore, so we'll skip that one, but there's 3 other symbols that we need to know. The first one is kind of this upside down V looking thing, and we call that and. So if I want to say something and something, I'm going to use that upside down V. Now here I've got what looks like a V. That's going to be, if this first one is and, the second one is or. Now, here's an easy way to remember. I'll teach you two different ways to remember. One way is I can turn this upside down V into an A for and. That's the less fun way to remember this. Let me teach you the more fun way. You can think about this as being like a little canoe, and somebody's standing in their canoe and they're holding an oar. That's a pretty terrible oar and a pretty terrible way of remembering it. But do what works for you. If you want a little canoe man with an oar to remember oar, great. If you want to look at the one that looks like an A and say and, fine. Be boring. All right, so the 3 dots is therefore. We should know that one. Don't really feel like spelling that out. And then the last one is if and only if. All right, so notice the first one with 1 arrow is implies. Notice here I've got 2 arrows. If I have 2 arrows, I should have 2 ifs. So we might say something. I go instead of saying if I go to the store, then I buy a hat. I go to the store if and only if I buy a hat. So we actually end up putting both ifs right in the middle. We'll see an example here. So let's turn some things into symbolic format, some more complicated statements just to try and see how this works. So I go out, well that's P, or that's gonna look like that, right? I eat ice cream, and that's gonna be Q. So that's pretty simple, right? P or Q. I go out or I eat ice cream. Let's look at the next one. Therefore, I play basketball and go out. So therefore is 3 dots. I play basketball is my R statement, and I go out, that's going to be my P statement. All right? Hopefully this is making sense. We're just kind of converting it right in. All right. I play basketball if and only if I don't eat ice cream. So I play basketball is going to be my R statement. If and only if, that tells me I am doing 2 arrows. I don't eat ice cream would be not Q. So not Q. Notice how this one has if and only if, so I have 2 arrows here. Let's look at this last one. Therefore, I play basketball and go out. Notice how we don't have it implies. I don't have any ifs here. This is not a conditional statement. It's just a statement with a therefore. There's no like if then, so I'm not going to have an arrow for implies. All right, last one. This one's going to be a little bit complicated, and we're going to take it piece by piece. If I go out and eat ice cream, so let's express that. I go out is P. And eat ice cream. So and ice cream is Q. Then I won't play basketball. So notice how the if statement is all together. So I'm actually going to put this in parentheses. P and Q implies, that's my if then statement. Notice how the if stays together, the then stays together. What does it imply? Not R. So if I go out and eat ice cream, then I won't go and play basketball. So and implies that we need both of them. Both things need to happen, going out and eating ice cream. Or says only one thing has to happen, but it could be both. If I said go out or eat ice cream, you could go out and eat ice cream. That would still be considered an or option. It could be both, it could be one or the other. As long as one or the other or both happens, it's okay. And means both have to happen. So when we're dealing with if-then statements with multiple pieces, we want to put the parentheses around. If I have multiple like this and this in a hypothesis or conclusion, we're going to put parentheses around it to kind of express that it's not P and Q implies not R. It's P and Q implies not R. All right, so that wraps up our lesson on symbolic format. I want you to go ahead and do the work assigned on Google Classroom, and as always, if you have questions, shoot me an email.